Good afternoon, Bermuda. Welcome to Facebook Live with Premier the Honorable David Burt, Minister of National Security, the Honorable Renee Ming, and the Assistant Commissioner of Police, Martin Weeks. We'll start with the Premier, who will give an welcome and an update, followed by the Minister of National Security. Mr. Weeks is here to answer any questions that you may have for the Bermuda Police Service. Premier? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much to you, Aderonka. Good evening to you. Good evening, Minister Ming. Good evening, ACOP Weeks, and good evening to our listening and watching audience this evening. Welcome to this Facebook Live event that is hosted by the Governor of Bermuda. Today, our aim is to answer any questions that you may have and to provide clarity on regulations for the stay-at-home order, which will be coming into effect tomorrow morning. Joining me tonight is the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Renee Ming, who will provide us with some updates from our ministry and the Bermuda Police Service and the Royal Bermuda Regiment. Following the Minister, I'll make an outline of the rules that will come into effect come tomorrow. This will build on the update of which I gave last night, and where only matters and persons that are deemed essential are able to leave their residence. But we're happy to speak on those in detail after the Minister of National Security provides her statement to the country. So, Minister, over to you.
Good evening, Bermuda. First of all, I'd like to say this is one time I'm doing the press conference, and I have the pleasure of doing it from the beautiful and the best parish of St. George's. Normally, I'm in Hamilton when I do the press statements. Bermuda, we find ourselves in a position this evening and at this stage where we have had to make change and we've had to evolve. And as a result of that, we have the stay-at-home regulations that will become into effect tomorrow. The Bermuda Police Service, the Bermuda Reserve Police, and the Royal Bermuda Regiment will be working in partnership in the enforcement of the stay-at-home COVID-19 regulations. We wish to commend the vast majority of residents who are following the relevant COVID-19 protocols and reaffirm the role of the BPS. The primary goal of the joint Bermuda Police Service and Royal Bermuda Regiment operations is to help keep residents safe during this pandemic. However, anyone found violating the rules should expect to appear in court. Therefore, I urge everyone to do their part and adhere to the regulations. During the latest stay-at-home order, which goes into effect tomorrow at 5 a.m., Tuesday, April the 13th, the joint operations will be conducting compliance checks, safety checks on the roads, and curfew checks at night. Please ensure you take note of all government guidance available to ensure that you do not fall outside of these regulations and give yourselves plenty of time to get home before 7 p.m. The Bermuda, there has been much discussion regarding breaches of the regulations, and here is what I can offer as an update. The Bermuda Police Service can confirm 2 recent breaches of COVID-19 regulations at liquor license premises. One breach occurred at a sports club in Pembroke on Friday, the 9th of April. Police officers responded to the location around 9:10 p.m. Details of the incident were provided in a BPS press release issued on Saturday, the 10th of April. The other breach occurred at another sports bar and restaurant in Sandys Parish on Sunday, the 11th of April. Police officers responded to the premises around 5:30 p.m., where a large number of people were gathered, apparently without masks or physical distancing. As a result, both premises were served 24-hour closure orders. The Pembroke Club was closed from 1:25 p.m. Saturday, April 10th, until 1:25 p.m. Sunday, April the 11th, while the other club was closed from 6:55 p.m. Sunday, April the 11th, until 6:55 p.m. today, Monday, April the 12th. It should also be noted that so far this month, up to and including today, Monday, April the 12th, 8 individuals have been charged in court for violating COVID-19 regulations, including breaching curfew, some for multiple curfew offenses, and hosting a party with more than 50 people. One of the individuals who appeared in court this month was fined $3,000 for violating COVID-19 regulations, while the other 7 cases continue to work through the court system. Depending on pandemic-related restrictions, it is anticipated that in the next 2 weeks, several more people will appear before the courts to face charges for violating COVID-19 regulations. Before I close, I'd just like to say that we've had several queries in the ministry today with regards to curfew waivers and extensions, and we will speak to that, but the process would be to go online to the government website. The form for the applications should be there, and you can apply online at govt.bm where the form can be found, and applications will be considered where they are urgent and can be put off until after the stay-at-home period or shelter period. They will be prioritized accordingly. Please apply only once, and your application will be processed as quickly as possible. All applications will receive a notification of receipt, followed by a reply either of approval or denying the application. Please read the exceptions, as last year there were hundreds of applications for activities that were already given approval through the regulations. I recognize, Bermuda, that these are anxious times for our people and our country. But for the latest actions, we are taking these actions to save lives. We urge the public's cooperation as we continue to work together to control this outbreak. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Ming, for your update. And now I'm going to just give an overview of the rules before we get to questions. And I note that a number of persons submitted their questions. I also want to thank our broadcasting partners, specifically Bermuda Broadcasting, as I understand that this is also being broadcast on ZFB TV 7 this evening. Yesterday, the government announced that a stay-at-home order will come into effect for 7 days beginning at 5 a.m. tomorrow, April 13th. We're taking this step in order to reduce the severe outbreak, which has led to increased hospitalizations and sadly 4 more deaths in our community. And I think the hospitalization numbers the Ministry of Health released earlier today were up to 41. Those are new people coming in, and of course, people have been discharged as well. This current outbreak started because of reckless conduct, which introduced a highly transmissible variant into our community due to continued household mixing and persons not adhering to the public health guidelines, despite the repeated requests from the government of Bermuda. The number of people in the hospital and the number of people in the ICU and the number of people testing positive for virus means that we need to take stronger action to stop the spread and to reduce the possibility of our healthcare system becoming overwhelmed. That is the reason why these rules are coming into place for the 7-day period. The main thing is that no person shall leave his or her home at any time of the day or night when this comes into effect, except for the following reasons, and provided, of course, that physical distancing and mask wearing is maintained at all times. The first are essential visits to a permitted business during the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. only. Permitted businesses include a grocery store, pharmacy, bank, gas station, office of a registered health professional, clinic, the hospital or another health facility, and that can also include a vet. Essential medical appointments during the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. only, except of course for an emergency situation or a procedure that is scheduled or an appointment that is scheduled outside that period. For instance, some persons go for dialysis, and so those persons can certainly attend their dialysis appointment at the hours in which it is scheduled, which may be outside of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You may also leave your residence for a walk or run alone or with one other member of the same household for a maximum period of 60 minutes per day during the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., only remaining at all times within 1 kilometer from your home. You're also allowed to leave your home to assist an elderly or vulnerable relative or neighbors during the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. only, except, of course, for an emergency situation. You're allowed to leave to attend an appointment at a COVID-19 testing center or a vaccination center. You're allowed to leave your residence to embark on a flight leaving Bermuda, and parents of a minor child who do not live together may also leave home during the curfew between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. only to take the child to stay for 1 or more nights at the home of the other parent to give an effect for an agreement which may exist between parents where there is shared custody. Public and private schools will remain closed, with the exception of teachers that are required to facilitate remote learning. We understand today from the Minister of Education that there are some teachers that do remote learning better from the premises, and there are some matters that are there. So those teachers will be able to travel to and from the place of their work. Of course, they will need to have identification and a letter of which would have been issued, and it is only to and from, but there are strict restrictions from the Ministry of Health for these persons. Of course, all Bermuda College is closed. Nurseries and daycare facilities, other than a facility that's approved by the Minister of Health for the care of children of essential services workers, are also closed. Of course, we know that all businesses are closed, bars and clubs, beauty salons, barbers, indoor place of public entertainment, all retail stores except for permitted businesses, and public beaches, parks, including the railway trails, and playgrounds are all closed. Churches and other religious establishments shall also remain closed to the public. Members of the clergy shall be permitted to enter a church or other religious establishments during the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. For private prayer, which is a maximum of 5 persons, or in order to broadcast a service via electronic means, and they will be a maximum of 10 persons to be allowed to do that. There's been a lot of questions around funerals. Indoor funerals are not permitted. Outdoor funerals are graveside funerals that are permitted with a maximum of 10 mourners, plus the officiant and funeral home staff, provided appropriate physical distancing and mask wearing is maintained at all times. There is a question, of course, when it comes to working from home being mandatory. Working from home is mandatory, and the only exceptions being the staff of permitted businesses and also essential workers and emergency responses for utility supplies such as electricity and domestic gas, water truckers. Clearly, if you're out of water, you will certainly be able to call a water trucker, and a water trucker will be able to deliver that water, or telecommunications, computer repair, and internet service providers, or plumbing or electrical repairs. That's important to know. Of course, working from home is mandatory outside of that. Hotels will be closed to the public. However, owners of hotels, guest houses, and vacation rentals must ensure certainly that the access to the amenities and the staff of the hotel are available to its guests only. Indoor bars shall remain closed inside of hotel properties. Indoor dining are permitted, provided that no more than 6 persons are seated at any one table, and the tables are at least 6 feet apart. And table service is permitted. So unlike last year, when hotels were not open, hotels are open. Guests will continue to be able to use the facilities inside of the hotels. However, only hotels are not available to be visited by members of the public. In regards to the most important part of the restrictions is its restrictions on visitation. And no person, unless already allowed and specified underneath this act, such as persons who may have to care for an elderly person or a vulnerable person, no visitation to another person's home or allowing visitors into your home. No person shall visit any place of quarantine or isolation. No person shall, of course, visit a patient at the hospital except for permission from the hospital, nor any visits to residential care facilities. What we said is that we will do, the cabinet will review these regulations and provide an update on how we will adapt them following the 7-day stay-at-home order in the coming days. The most important thing is that we take these current measures seriously and we ensure we follow them without hesitation. We are doing this to provide time for our healthcare services to catch up, to ensure that we can expand our vaccination program and our testing program, and to make sure that we can isolate cases which exist inside the community to ensure that there is no further spread of this particular very contagious variant. I know there is a significant amount of angst in regarding what it is that we are doing, but the fact is that we have to make sure that we protect the hospital. Today, we've seen the results, positivity rate down to 1.6%. We've seen some of these things go down and go back up. We have to continue to maintain, to stay the course. Now, in regards to the restrictions, because I know there's a number of questions and I know that the curfew exemption form is live on forms.gov.bm in case persons want to go there. And it does state all the people who are not required to apply for an exemption. If you go to forms.gov.bm, you will see, of course, persons who are members of the uniformed services, who work in healthcare, who are working at the vaccination centers and the testing centers, persons who are working, of course, as members of funeral home staff, persons who are at the border, in the docks or at the airport, and persons who are members of the essential services, in addition to members of the media, and persons who are working as part of the Department of Child and Family Services are not required to complete a curfew exemption as they are already exempted under law. However, it is very important to note that those individuals who will certainly be questioned if they are stopped during the day by enforcement, it's very important to also note, to remember, that persons who are exempt from this curfew may only be exempt when on official business, working or traveling to and from work. And any and all such persons shall carry identification at all times and show to an enforcement officer upon request. And that is why it is important to note that it is not unlimited for persons who are exempted from curfew. You have to be going to and from work, and that is most important. In regards to persons who are not allowed to, persons who are allowed to not work remotely, first of all, of course, it is essential services. Those persons have to be at their place. The other persons who are not required to work remotely are, of course, wholesale food suppliers, registered commercial farmers, and licensed fishermen, as is the same as last year. Certainly, as our hotels are open, hotel staff cannot do their job remotely at home, the ones that are required to be on premises. As we had already mentioned before, teachers who are required to facilitate remote learning, persons who are providing supervision for the children of essential workers. In addition to that, persons who are providing laundry services to institutions are exempt or from the requirement to work from home, but of course they can only be going to and from their place of work. Persons who are required to care or feed for animals are allowed to leave to go and care and feed for their animals, and that includes persons who may have to go to a pet shop to feed pets at a pet shop. However, pet shops are not open. Of course, funeral homes are open. Courier and delivery services are allowed to operate, but those are only for persons who are engaged in these services on behalf of government departments or other urgent deliveries for essential services only. So that means those services are closed to the public. There's also delivery available for charitable food organizations, food delivery for persons who are delivering food. And persons who are engaged to clean, maintain, or repair the premises of any permitted business, and that would be the business of which we mentioned, doctor's offices, hotels, vacation homes, are able to travel to their place of work to complete that work and then to travel home. I know there's a question about food delivery. The rules do allow for supermarkets, pharmacies, etc., to go ahead and provide delivery services. Also, I recognize that alphabetized shopping has returned. I know that the government had made sure that the matters were put out before, but just to summarize again, Mondays and Thursdays for last names that begin with A to F. Tuesdays and Fridays, last names that begin with G to Q. Wednesdays and Saturdays, last names that begin from R to Z. And Sundays shall be reserved for persons age 55 and over, disabled persons, and those persons who fall in schedules 1 and 2, which are those persons who are under the essential services workers. Madam Director, I'm sure there's a number of questions, but I hope that provides a comprehensive overview of what is open and what is closed. But I would like to repeat again, all outdoor activities, save and except for 60 minutes of exercise within 1 kilometer with your house with one other person from your household, all other establishments and all other matters in the country are closed, including restaurants for take-in and dining. There was an error yesterday that was put out. Everything is closed for 7 days. It is important that we mix as little as possible to allow our health teams to make sure to catch up and also to advance the vaccination and testing efforts.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Minister. Premier, we received quite a number of questions before we actually started, and we've had a number of questions come in since we started broadcasting. I'd like to remind everybody that if you do have questions, go to Govt's Facebook page and put your questions in the comments, and we will try to get through as many questions as possible. So I'll start with this one. Can I ask why laundromats are not considered essential when a lot of people do not have washers and dryers at home and clean clothes are necessary? Also, why can't it be considered, or can it be considered to be scheduled days by last name for people to go like they do for the grocery stores?
Last year, when we did the shelter in place, which the first 2 weeks, laundromats were not included. The next 2 weeks they were. It's not intended for this stay-at-home order to extend past these 7 days to allow our essential health care services to catch up and to make sure that we can isolate the cases that may exist inside the community. I recognize the inconvenience that is there. I recognize the danger, not necessarily the danger, the drastic nature of which persons may consider in this action, but it is necessary and proper. And so our job is what we are trying to do is to minimize as much interaction as possible. And this period will last for 7 days, and the following 7 days, the provisions of which you have spoken about will be able to be considered.
Another question, what about trash collection?
Trash collection will continue as normal. However, the Tynes Bay facility for dropping off household waste will not be open.
Since dental is medical, can the public who have dental appointments keep those appointments?
It will be up to your practitioner whether or not they choose to open their office. I know that some dental practitioners have chosen not to open their office.
Can you advise if caregivers are allowed to go to their jobs to look after their clients?
I'm assuming we're talking about elderly caregivers?
Yes.
I think that I covered that in my items, but absolutely, if they are someone who is providing the care and assistance to someone who is vulnerable during the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., that is permitted. If it is after hours, then they will need to apply to the Minister of National Security for said exemption.
And can someone speak to what will happen to people experiencing homelessness and those who need food and shelter?
The Minister of Social Development and Seniors has been working with helping agencies and also the places where individuals are sheltered to ensure that, number one, there is going to be adequate food provision. Number two, that testing is going to be made available to ensure that there is no spread. The view was considered whether or not to open up a shelter, as was done last year, additional shelter. But the risk with a community transmission situation, which we're in, with a very contagious strain of the virus, was thought that that was not in keeping. But the Minister of Social Development and Sport will give more details on that. But those persons who are unsheltered are being considered and provided for.
Thank you, Premier. Can churches still broadcast services over the weekend?
I think I answered that, but Minister of National Security, you want to chime in? I don't want to answer all the questions.
Takes me a little longer to get that mute mic in, but the question was relating to church services.
Yes.
And the answer is for virtual, and the answer would be yes, they can. They are allowed to have the technical team and the pastor in the church. I think it's no more than 10 persons allowed.
Thank you, Minister. Is going for a vaccine essential travel? Will taxis be running for those who don't have transportation for essential travel?
Excellent question in regards to taxis and in regards to transportation. We will know that visitors and residents go to the vaccination centers and also to the testing centers. That travel, of course, is allowed. Understanding specifically when it comes to that travel, individuals and persons who may be, if people are transporting someone to a vaccination center, then clearly they are able to transport persons. So if that's a taxi or another type of service, certainly a taxi will be able to transport someone to any of the permitted businesses which are open. So that's a doctor's office, a grocery store, a pharmacy, a testing center, or a vaccination center.
Thank you. One of the questions that came in earlier, can we find out whether grocery store workers are exempt from the curfew?
Grocery store workers are not exempt from the curfew, but I think it's important for us to understand what we're doing with this stay-at-home order. Permitted businesses are able to operate between the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That does not mean that all permitted businesses will be operating between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. However, at a broad level, the curfew is in place for 24 hours. And so the only excuse that you have to be on the roads is if you are attending one of the things which are allowed for you to attend. So if you're going to a vaccination center, that is fine to be on the roads. If you're going to a testing facility, that is fine. If you're on your designated shopping day and you're going to the supermarket, that is fine. However, if you or you are a grocery store worker and you're going to work at the grocery store, having your identification, that is fine. What is not fine, of course, is just to leave your house and to go somewhere or to try to visit someone else's house.
Thank you. Is there an exemption form for volunteer workers for essential food provision? For example, the Cathedral Lunch Program.
Ms. You want to answer that or shall I?
You can answer it, Premier.
Absolutely. One of the things that which I had said when I reviewed the matters was that there is a number of people who are not required to work from home, and charitable food deliveries are included there. Also, restaurants are closed except for a kitchen which is being used for the preparation of charitable food for giving, whether it's the unsheltered population or for those persons who require food.
Thank you. Are hotels open per normal? If so, can I book a staycation and reap the benefits of laying by the pool, getting basically the amenities in a hotel?
You want me to handle that, Minister?
You are responsible for tourism, so I believe you can definitely take that question.
Thank you very much, Minister. What I will say is that hotel services are available to their guests only. It will not be lawful for you to travel to a hotel during the period in time when the restrictions are in place. So if you want a staycation, I would recommend that you pack your bags and get there tonight.
Another question, can I connect my daughter from the airport to not tomorrow, or do I need to seek permission?
Minister, I'll let you handle that one.
Transportation to the airport is permitted.
Thank you. Who do we need?
Let me just say to and from. I'm sorry, I know the person didn't ask that, but to and from.
Thank you. Another question from online. Who do we contact for exemptions? How do people get exemptions?
Sure, I can answer that one as well. You can go online at forms.gov.bm, and that is the form you can come. It's an online form, and it goes straight to our vetting team to be vetted, and you'll get a notification that once that it has been received, and the second one will be whether your request has been approved or denied.
Thank you. Will vets, offices / surgeries and pet food shops be open during this period?
Minister, you want to handle that one? Wait.
Is it you? I'm sorry, you can have that one, Premier.
Vets will able to remain open as they are defined as medical services. However, pet shops will not be open. However, persons may enter their pet shops to feed the pets which are inside the pet shops, which will require to be fed.
Thank you. What time is curfew?
Curfew is continuous. Curfew starts April 13th at 5 a.m. and expires April 20th at 5 a.m. And so persons are not allowed to leave their premises outside of the matters of which were laid out.
Am I still allowed to take a senior relative to supermarket and medical appointments? We share a bubble, even though in different households.
Provision is made for persons who need to assist their elderly family and vulnerable family members. And that was one of the things which I covered at the beginning when I reviewed it. So the answer to that question is yes.
Okay. Just quickly looking for another question online. A family member is in the middle of moving house and needs contractors to finish off work before they move and has to paint the house they are leaving all before the end of the month. Can you advise?
Minister?
Aderonka, I don't know if it was just me, but I didn't hear all of your question.
Sure. Somebody's actually moving and they're in the middle of moving, but in order to move, they have to be able to get where they're moving to finish with contractors, and where they're leaving from, have that painted. Is that permissible?
Take that one, Premier. Unfortunately, that's not permitted at this time.
Thank you. Will there be policing and checks in place to ensure limited movement and that protocols are being adhered to? Or do we have to call 211, which means we will be at stay at home a lot longer?
Me to answer that one?
Surely.
Certainly, there will be joint policing, as the Minister stated at the start of the press conference. The Bermuda Police, along with the Royal Bermuda Regiment and the Bermuda Reserve Police, will be out during the curfew. We will be out at night and we will be out during the day. You should expect to see road checks similar to we experienced during the last shelter in place. You should expect to see police cars around at night to make sure you're not out and about driving. You should expect to see checks being made at beaches and parks to make sure that you're not there, or on the railway trails. And you should also expect to see police checks around grocery stores and other exempted businesses to ensure people are in compliance with distancing, masks, etc. So yes, you will see quite a lot of policing activity as you did during the previous shelter in place.
Thank you. Would 7 days be suffice since the virus is in your system for a minimum of 14 days?
Thank you, Aderonka. That question was asked quite a few times. It was also asked last evening. There will be a further period of restrictions that will be stronger than the restrictions which are currently in place right now. However, those restrictions will not be a strict, a 7-day pause as which we have. This circuit breaker is necessary to allow the health teams to catch up. There will certainly be periods of further restrictions. We'll be moving and discussing those in the cabinet tomorrow and most likely relaying those to the public when all those matters are fully canvassed on Thursday to give an outlook to what the next 2-week period will look like. But from the perspective of where we are right now, we do need to have this circuit break to give the health teams time to catch up and for additional mobilization. There is a lot of mixing that was going on. And even after, and I think this is a key point to note, that the government is expecting that after this 7-day period, there still will be the restrictions on families mixing and visiting other homes. That is the key source of challenge right now, that and workplaces, which we ended when we went to mandatory work from home over 2 weeks ago, but the continued mixing of households, even mixing of households over the Easter weekend, which is causing challenges. So that is the reason why these measures need to be put in place.
Thank you, Premier.
Aderonka, there was a second part to your question that I didn't answer, and that was in relation to the 211 number. The 211 number will be manned. We encourage people to call that number to report breaches. It is not, unfortunately, a helpline for COVID matters. There are other numbers for that. So if you are going to call the 211 number, we ask that you do that to report breaches, or use the online portal on the Bermuda Police Service website, which will allow you to also report breaches where you see them.
Thank you very much. I know this question may have been asked last year, but do you have to shop at the grocery store near you? Presumably near that person's house.
Would you like for me to answer that one, Premier?
Please, Minister.
Sure. And I can relate to, I'm sure, that person, because last year, us in St. George's, we did kick a bit of a fuss. But you don't, but you should try to stay, as close to your home as possible. The order is a stay-at-home order, but we recognize that grocery shopping and food is a necessity.
Thank you. This is about food delivery. Can businesses that normally will be have sit-in dining be allowed to offer delivery service to those who may not be able to cook?
During this period in time, all restaurants are closed.
Thank you. Can dental services be confirmed as normal operating as normal? Can dental services be considered operating as normal?
Dental services will fall underneath health services, so they are not banned from being open. But I do know that certain dentists are restricting service and others. So you would have to check with your own dental office to understand exactly what restrictions they may have.
Thank you. Payroll taxes due on the 15th. Will that deadline be extended?
Persons can file their payroll tax online, as I know that many persons are. However, the Minister of Finance will certainly be speaking to that. We will certainly have future updates regarding that deadline, to what provisions will be made for persons who typically pay their payroll tax in person. Certainly there will have to be an extension, but we will outline what the extension will look like.
Thank you. Can medications for pets be picked up from vets' offices on shopping days?
Travel to a veterinary facility is permitted. And so the answer to the question would be yes.
Are parks open for walking?
No.
Can we ride our horses?
Renee, do you want to try and handle that one?
I smiled when I heard the question, and I think I'm going to leave that one with you because I do know a conversation on it earlier today about parks and beaches.
That's absolutely. I'm not entirely certain if that question came from the opposition leader asked me about riding the horse. What I would say is that care of animals is permitted. So care of animals is permitted, but the matter of beaches, parks, and railway trails, as was the last time, those are closed. Beaches, parks, railway trails are all closed.
Thank you. Can food banks open?
Food banks are charitable items which are permitted to be open.
Are parents of multiples allowed to go for walks together? As you stated, only one person from the same household. So if like 3 or 4 people live together.
As the rules are currently outlined, that is a no. The rules as they state are with one person from your household.
Thank you. Will fully vaccinated people be allowed to exercise together indoors while still maintaining social distancing and wearing a mask? I'm assuming that's like in a gym type situation. Will fully vaccinated people be allowed to exercise together indoors?
Minister, would you like to handle that?
Kramer, that would be one for you.
The answer is no, 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 no. There is no mixing, so you certainly could not be, this is 7 days. And I think the key point is, because I know there's persons who are saying, oh, you know, we don't know what the next 7 days will look like. Oh, what the government outlined last evening, which will come into place tomorrow, is the fact that at this point in time, we need our health services to give our time for our health services to catch up. This is a very important time where we're just asking everyone to remain in their homes, to leave their home as little as possible so that we can catch up, identify cases, understand where the clusters are, so we can do the work to make sure that we can return back to some level of normal activity.
And what about food wholesalers? Are they allowed to open?
You're looking at me to take that one, Kramer?
You're more than welcome to do so.
The answer would be yes.
Yes. Foods wholesalers are able to be open in order to supply groceries in supermarkets. They're not open to their customer base, certainly.
Thank you. Will minibus drivers require special permission to transport essential workers to and from work?
They will not have to apply to the Minister of National Security for that special permission. Absolutely not. However, they're only allowed to transport persons to and from work or to and from permitted businesses.
Will the buses be running?
Bus services were scheduled. However, I have seen inside of my email inbox that there may be disruption to bus services. So that statement will be going. Bus services were scheduled to operate on the Sunday schedule. for the duration of the 7-week period. And so that will be confirmed. That is how they are scheduled, but there may be a disruption.
Okay. Premier, you said 7 week. I just want to clarify that it
7
is
days.
7 days.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Will the regulations be published?
Absolutely.
And Minister, do you want to say where people will be able to find them?
You can find them on the government's website on the COVID-19 tab. When you go right in, there's always a COVID thing that says COVID updates. And then for those persons that are savvy, you can also use Bermuda laws.bm. There's a side bucket button right on the right-hand side that says recent, and you'll find any recent legislation there.
Thank you. Do taxi drivers require an exemption letter to drive essential services clients?
No, they do not.
Can people swim in the ocean or ride bikes during lockdown?
I think the indication was that beaches are actually closed at this time, so no, you would not be able to swim.
Is international travel permitted?
You may get on a plane and leave, absolutely.
So what happens if an essential worker is working on the days that are either a Sunday when they can go to the grocery store, or on the day that it is their last name, alphabet day to go to the grocery store? How can they get groceries?
My view at that point in time, I would ask persons to certainly avail themselves of a grocery delivery service, or ask one of their friends or family to possibly take them. We're trying to make sure we keep this tight for the 7-day period.
Thank you. Can we get information on the unemployment benefit and who is eligible?
The unemployment benefit is up online at uba.gov.bm. So, sorry, I'm now checking the website. And it says, in response to the recent announcement of a second stay-at-home period commencing on the 13th of April, 2021, the Bermuda government is finalizing its new unemployment benefit regulations. After Cabinet meets on the 13th of April, there will be a press conference explaining the application requirements and procedures. And it says, temporarily, in an effort to avoid erroneous applications, this website will not accept new applications, and asking persons to go back on Wednesday morning for an update and further instructions. But on the whole, any business that is affected, or any person who is affected by a mandatory business closure, will be eligible. And the rate is 60% of your salary, up to a maximum of $500.
Thank you. What about roadside farmers markets and fishermen? Can they still sell?
That is something that licensed commercial farmers and licensed commercial fishermen are able to go. Insofar as roadside service, that's certainly something that I'll ask the Minister of National Security to take back and we'll look to clarify. I do not believe the answer is yes, as I think under the initial terms of shelter in place that we had last year, that was not permitted for these 7 days.
I'm just going to read the question, and Minister, you may want to answer this. Do the regulations apply to St. David's?
The regulations definitely apply to St. David's, which is in the parish of St. George's.
Thank you very much, Minister. So how is there an exemption for on-call technicians so that they can attend any urgent or emergency calls that may come in for their businesses? So for example, electricians, repairmen, plumbers, etc.
That section was actually covered in the regulations. I was gonna try to find it, but it does give for utility. And it says that, here we go. And I'll read it just so that persons are clear, because I think it was the second question we had of this nature. During the curfew, persons providing the following services are permitted to respond to emergency calls for supply, restoration of service, or repairs, provided appropriate physical distancing is maintained at all times. Utility supply, electricity and domestic gas, water truckers, telecommunications, computer repairs, and internet service providers, plumbing and electrical repairs.
Thank you very much. We have another question. Premier Minister, you just may want to repeat the answer. How far from our homes can we walk?
1 kilometer.
Are teachers considered essential workers?
Teachers are not considered essential workers as defined in law under the Essential Services Act. Teachers, however, in this case and instance, as I indicated when I gave my overview, teachers are able to go into their school under strict conditions which have been issued from the Ministry of Health in order to deliver remote work. That does not mean that all teachers are going. I know that the Minister of Education spoke to a cabinet committee meeting earlier and said there are certain teachers that would like to go in, and that's why this provision was put in. So some teachers may want to deliver remote learning at work. At the school, and might be better at the school. But apart from that, persons should remain at home.
Thank you very much. Will the banks be open?
I'll leave that one to you, Renee.
Surely, the banks will be open. I believe the hours are 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. I'm not sure if that's all banks actually, so I'll just say the banks will be open. And they are a permitted business as well, financial services.
Thank you. What about daycare centers that care for essential workers' babies? Can they remain open?
I just received an answer from my team on this, and the answer was yes.
Somebody asked, can you take little kids for a drive just to get them out of the house?
I would certainly not recommend that. But I'll let the Minister of National Security speak to that, as she's responsible for security. Minister, your thoughts?
Well, the order isn't actually a stay-at-home order, and I do recognize that when you have young children, it can be quite daunting. Maybe we can find something to do outside in the yard with them. And it's an opportunity to kind of look at some of those old school games, the Simon Says, the Duck Duck Goose. I know that you can be quite creative during this period and do things with your children that you probably normally may not do. So I would offer that, and probably kind of shows an age difference.
Thank you, Minister. Premier, I'm just aware of the time. It's 8:31. We have time
a few minutes late, so we can go a few minutes over.
A few more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Just quickly looking through. How can small businesses get assistance at this time?
Small businesses are welcome to go to the BEDC website at bedc.bm. The BEDC will be releasing a statement tomorrow, and they will be providing assistance to industries that are going to be closed for a week, for this week.
Thank you. Some healthcare facilities do not have forms of ID. And we're told not to fill out the form. Is it correct that an employer issuing a letter is suffice? And so I think what they're asking is if you need to be able to get to work in these healthcare facilities, will a letter from the employer get them there without being stopped or turned back?
I can answer that if you like, Mr. Premier.
That we'll be in a place where we can hopefully see the end of these restrictions for a long time. But our job over the next time, until we get to that place of herd immunity, is going to be difficult.
Premier, can you speak to this? People are still mixing in grocery stores and they are still panic buying. It's not so much a question as a statement, but can you speak to that?
The panic buying is certainly unhelpful, and that's not, there's nothing we can do about that. However, there is enough food for everyone. The grocery stores are still open. People certainly are mixing in a grocery store. That's why they're limited capacity. However, in a grocery store, we know that everyone is at least wearing a mask, and people are in the place where the precautions are being taken, because by law, those establishments that are permitted to operate must enforce those restrictions. But there is no need to panic buy. I unfortunately understand that there was a lot of that taking place. I'm certain that the wholesalers, which are allowed to restock the retailers, will go ahead, and there will be plenty of food that will be available for persons who are attending their grocery stores on their name days.
Thank you. What about parks for vaccinated people who have done their part in this? Other places in the world are offering special exemptions. Should we not be privy to this?
It's a consideration that the government will take on board as we move forward to understanding what the next phases will look like as we move ourselves to our herd immunity target of the end of May.
Thank you. Just quickly seeing if there are any questions that we haven't answered. So just for absolute clarity, I have this question. Please confirm curfew hours as of tomorrow.
It's important to note, and it's something that I may have misspoke on yesterday when I gave the hours. The law, which I think has gone up to the governor, so once the governor signs it, it will be published. But the law is that the curfew is continuous. So the curfew starts at 5 a.m. on Tuesday, April 13th, and it ends at 5 a.m. on Tuesday, April 20th. The curfew is continuous, and the only persons that are permitted to leave their residence during that time are the ones in which we spelled out. So visits to the essential services, to the permitted businesses, and persons who are required to work at the permitted businesses.
Thank you. And so just as we get ready to wrap up, I have a question about the airport. Will the airport remain open?
Minister, I think that's in St. George's. You can answer.
The airport will remain open.
And what about caring for plants at a plant nursery?
At Aronka, I also have an answer for a question It's come on my phone, so I went out and got it. But all three banks, HSBC, Butterfield, and Clarion, their operating hours during this period are 9 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Thank you, Minister. And I'll just look quickly for any other questions that we may not have answered. Any new restrictions for persons arriving in Bermuda?
There will be some changes which will be announced later this week. And as I had indicated in previous items, that there will most likely be at the end of this period a mandatory quarantine period for all persons that are arriving to Bermuda who are not immunized.
Will gas stations be open?
Yes, gas stations can be open.
All right. And I'm just reading this, so I think this is a good time to end. It says, stop repeating questions, please. So I think that's a good sign for us to perhaps wrap up. I've asked, I think the vast majority of the questions that came in during the time that we've been together. Minister Premier, do you have any closing words?
Minister, you can go first.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the ministry staff, because they've been very good this evening, even trying to make sure that I had the answers to supply, and they do a lot of hard work during this period, and they'll continue to do hard work as we begin to vet the curfew waivers. And I'd also like to say thank you to the Bermuda Police Service, the Royal Bermuda Regiment, the Customs, Bermuda Fire Service, and Department of Corrections, all of our workers that sometimes see behind the scenes, but they work hard for Bermuda, also keeping us safe under the national security umbrella. And to my people in Bermuda, I'd just like to say, we've come this far. Let's not allow ourselves to become complacent. We have 7 days of a stay-at-home order. We're asking you to comply. And as we always say, we will get through this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
I will just like to echo the comments of the Minister of National Security. Thank her and her team for their work. We recognize that this is a very high pressure situation. What we want to make sure that we do is taking the decisions that are in interest of the health of the majority of the country. And what we want to make sure is that persons take the next 7 days to please stay in their homes. Please leave their homes as little as possible. Please do not try to tempt fate. Please do not try to find a way out of it. Please do not try to find a way around it. We all need to take this pause at this time to make sure that we can protect the health of persons in this country. So I would urge us all, as much as we want restrictions, as much as we want loopholes, as much as we want changes, as much as we want to find a way around this, to understand that this step has not been taken lightly, but it is taken because the government is determined and deemed that it is the best action to protect the health of the population that we are sworn to protect. So with that, I want to wish everyone a wonderful evening from my isolation. You'll be seeing me in this place for quite some time. But I look forward to speaking with members of the media and the public tomorrow afternoon with our update from the Minister of Health. So thank you to Bermuda and good night.
Thank you. Good night.